at a time of great anxiety, when there is so much value being placed on action and tasks, how they can find a way to value actually not doing something for a minute. You know, it might feel very counterintuitive at this time, a bit navel gazing when everything's going a crazy. But I think perhaps just I'm sure there are practical things. I was talking to you earlier about my desire to always fix things. I will pull back. But
well, yeah, I mean, you could start a meeting with 10 minutes reflection or 10 minutes checking in. You could end the meeting with reflection, you know, so you could kind of think, okay, so let's structure something into our meeting so people can say where they're at, you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's interesting you should say that idea of you know, what's, if we're thinking about where we are now and why is it different to 9 weeks, 9 weeks ago, that the point you just made, we all knew how to do meetings, even if we were the 1 or 2 people that called in. We, you know, we all knew the implicit rules of getting a meeting done, and its relative formality and the behaviour appropriate. And I was listening to a session recently where as a leader, if you're used to approaching a meeting in one way, and then now you're going to start with something which ordinarily you wouldn't do, that's going to be an interesting experience for them. For a leader who normally goes, right, action point 1, but you know, Lucy, you're on, to stop and say, I'm just going to ask everyone how they are. That in itself potentially could feel quite unnecessary and strange.
Well, you know, everything you do for the first time feels unnecessary and strange, doesn't it? It makes us feel uncomfortable. And it's kind of, I think it's that, well, thinking about, I mean, what is helpful? Can we get back to the purpose of what it's for? And if the purpose is to facilitate a better meeting, wouldn't you give it a try?
Yeah.
You know?
So I think that's really a really good point. I mean, it sort of talks about the assumptions. Can we stop and think about, be alert to the assumptions that one made in the previous world that you perhaps aren't thinking about now? Maybe that's you know, is it that we need to stop and say, that we could stop and say, how is everyone?
Yeah, because
whereas in the past we would have done it in the coffee area.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of, it happened, but there was more of an implicit knowing of how it would happen. So it happened as you grabbed your coffee on the way into the meeting, or that kind of thing. So,
or
we don't have that
as somebody goes past, or an eyebrow raise, you know.
Yeah, so we don't have those. We don't have the implicit stuff. We don't have the informal spaces. You know, but there still needs to be a way for people to connect in order to connect with each other as well as to the work. So, you know, what I've really noticed is that online meetings need a lot more structure and preparation in order to facilitate them smoothly.
That idea of being much more detailed about meetings, about the content. I've forgotten what it was. Damn. Oh my.
In terms of the structure, how you structure it, or?
Yes, being explicit about the nuts and bolts, down to the number of roles that somebody holds concurrently in a meeting. So in a meeting, if I'm a chair, I can be looking at all the board members. I've got an idea of how they interact. I've got a feeling for, I can see when somebody's itching to join in. You know, I'm not having to worry about whether they can sit on their chair or whether they can open the meeting room door. So actually the roles that grow in a meeting, there's value in thinking about splitting them up. I'm the person who looks after the questions. I'm the person that makes sure everyone's able to join. You know.
Yeah. We certainly, I've found that, you know, if there's more than half a dozen people in a meeting, I guess, to have a content moderator and a technology moderator. so whoever's the content moderator isn't managing letting people in from the waiting room or checking the chat, but they can kind of alert the content moderators to something in the chat if they haven't seen it, because it's kind of hard to watch all the different parts of the machine, if we think of it as a machine, a process, at once. You know, you're trying to track all the people on the screen, then when you have to read the chat, your head kind of goes sideways, you kind of lose momentum. You know, you're kind of trying to say, I'm just looking at the chat, and so awkward. But you know, I think there are just some practical things you could do, as you say, like separate, you know, maybe separating out what was one role into two roles so that people can focus on particular things. Yeah.
So perhaps what it points to is that the finding a way to think about what you would have assumed, you know.
Yeah.
And then thinking about it in the context of this environment. Maybe that's there is no, I think there is no one way, there is no answer.
Well, I think sorry.
No, that's all right.
It's this whole online, you know, having to try and you can't always read the cues so well. So I find sometimes I cut across people because I think they've finished and I misread it because I'm not quite. Anyway, you know, the whole thing about the roles, but also, you know, it's like we expect everyone else to know as much about the platform we're using as we do. So if we know a lot, we think everyone does, and if we don't know very much, we think nobody else knows either. And sometimes it can be hard to talk to that, you know, if it's not made explicit, and you don't sort of open up a space to go, okay, so does everyone know how it functions? These are all the different things we've got access to. We'll use this process for doing this. You know, that can be just, if that's not shared, it can kind of leave people in that awkward position of, oh, I should know this and I don't, and how do I figure it out while contributing to the meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you give them too many roles at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, they're beginner, they're the expert content person, and the beginner trying to work out how to put themselves on mute, my obsession. So it's and this could be this is a transition. This is a transition. So but one, I think that there is no one way to do these kinds of meetings.
No.
So the odds are that somebody's always going to be the beginner.
Or
the
a beginner on a different platform. I think at the moment I'm using Zoom a lot for meetings. I use Collaborate Ultra for some teaching. I use Microsoft Teams with a group that I'm working with. Another client uses WebEx. So it's not even just, you know, how do you build your familiarity with all the platforms, and you're used to one and you go to another and you think that works there. Oh, it doesn't work here. Hold on. I thought I knew how this worked and I don't, you know. So I find that, and of course they're always introducing new upgrades all the time with extra security features and things that you need to get your head around. So I do find that, you know, maybe that, you know, you're making me think that maybe in our meetings, one of the first things we should do is, you know, is everyone's technology set up okay? Anyone got any questions?
And how you can ask a question of a group. So back to the idea of game face, where it's, you know, it's a bit like saying, can everyone work the handle to the meeting room? And everyone goes, and the one person who can't goes, well, I'm not going to ask. You know, it's actually quite a fraught, you know, there's a whole emotional piece in there of success or not success, you know, of how you actually, just the basics. It's really quite, but I think your point about people assume that how they experience it is how everyone else experiences it is a really, really interesting point.
You know, when you're in a meeting and you're on gallery view and you think everyone else is on gallery view, and then someone's saying, I can't see that person, why can't I see that person? And you realize they're on speaker view, and so then you have the whole, I didn't know there were two views, they say, or, you know.
I know. And so
you're learning it. So, but there is an assumption that everyone just knows this stuff, you know.
And I just, that's, maybe we should think about that another time, because I think there's a whole world of stuff in there.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's been really good to just check in at this time.
Yeah.
It's clearly not the same.
Look, it's definitely not. And I think what, you know, this conversation, what's really come out for me is, you know, how can organisations think of themselves as learning organisations? Because really what this is requiring of us is to have the capacity to learn from what we're doing, and not just assume we know it, or assume it can be done the same way it was before, or that when we finally come out of confinement, that it will be the same as it was. You know, I think the concept of a learning organisation, concepts of action learning or action research, where we do it and try it out and see what happens and keep adapting, is really important.
And find ways for people to not be experts, irregardless of, that's a terrible word, irrespective of their I think it's a made-up word, regardless of their, you know, their place in the hierarchy, or time in an organisation, or so thank you so much for joining me. I hope that we can do this again in a few weeks and see what the temperature's like out there then.
Indeed, that'd be great. Thanks, Andrea.
Thanks, Nuala.
Yeah.